You're from there.
Right. Hello, my name is Felix Roy. I'm going to talk today about transcendence and information theory. First, a quote from Nikola Tesla. The day science begins to study non-physical phenomena, it will make more progress in one decade than in all the previous centuries of its existence. How is information processed in a biological organism? We have, first of all, DNA. DNA is the foundation of life. It's a classic example for the process of storing symbolic information. We have 20 amino acids which produce different proteins. But we have actually 4 bases which produce in different combinations 20 amino bases which produce different proteins. We have an interpretational infrastructure which can read this information of the amino acids and produce some outcome. The DNA is copied and modified because of environmental influence. But still, the interpretational infrastructure will be the same. So it has to be copied with the DNA. It has to be within there somewhere. Second, single cells. Single cells react on a stimulus from the environment. But as soon as the information, the stimulus from the environment reaches the cell becomes the stimulus itself because it activates an intrinsic process. So the organism is first the messenger and then the stimulus itself. Also within its interpretational infrastructure again. And we have signal pathways which involve the transition between symbolic information process and causal processes. But specific chemicals which an organism releases on external stimulus can have on different times very different outcomes. So we are still back on that interpretational infrastructure. And this leads me to the conclusion it's rather a symbolic process than a causal process, because you have one thing and it can lead to many outcomes within the same cell, and there has to be a process which judges the needs actually of the cell in that moment to release the right reaction. And we can go on. We have multicellular organisms as we are. Life is more complex, especially our eye, the visual infrastructure. You watch a picture, you get information, visual information, in your eye, and it splits up and comes to your brain as many different forms of information. And what you do is you compare it with your store, with your memory, and then your brain, because of experience, can identify single persons, for example. just by the comparison of the signal and the memory we have. This experience, this memory is based on experience of things we have seen, so imitation, and associations, so symbolic processes. Then we have the learning as a next step. Oh, that's actually wrong. We just have the language. Language has a medium which is sound waves. The symbols are the words. And the interpretational structure are many different layers. Culture, knowledge, and so on. Imagination and creativity, from the information theory side, they are processing increased information is the cause for the development of imagination in our brains. So we imagine things because we need to process more and more information. So we actually build up a new symbolic part for many different information just to collect it. I wrote, beyond empirical associations, we create new conditions in the world. Symbols represent ideas of an individual are self-generated, so they are your ideas. Every single person has their own ideas, which they generate in their own brain. What creativity and imagination does is actually it increases the level of uncertainty. So we have many new symbols, so we have many more possibilities. And that room is still, that space is still open to us. Yeah, we can imagine freely, still dependent on our culture and things we have learned. It is only limited by the properties of the interpretational infrastructure. But with that, we can create ourselves information about hypothetical futures. That's what we're doing in the utopias, for example. The origin of life is a mystery. So the genetic code and the interpretational infrastructure for reading it out, as I just explained on the DNA part, must have evolved at the same time. Because if you just have the information, you cannot read it. If you can read it and you don't have information, it's not leading anywhere. So must have originated together. So actually it can be that all life on that planet has the same single root. It cannot be understood by determinism. Means that because of the many layers in the interpretational infrastructure, you cannot start dividing things, ripping the whole thing apart and scientifically observe just single things. You always have to interpret it. You need a holistic kind of view. Patet said, therefore the interpretation or function of any such semiotic or informal sequence is literally metaphysical. We are feeling separated from our body. We think we have a mind, but what is our mind is matter, or is our mind more than the matter? Are you more than your brain? That's a question which cannot be answered by the deduction and the analysis of the matter or the functioning of all the biological parts of the body, because we have still this infrastructure which interprets symbols. For example, C.G. Jung had a concept of a collective mind. So all people are kind of connected. The more we understand scientifically, from the scientific side, about life and about the origin of life, the more it becomes symbolic. The less we can explain it with logics. I will come to that on the next step. And also a quote, the mystery may indicate that important scientific principles remain to be discovered. So we cannot measure, maybe we cannot measure some media of information which is there, we just cannot measure it. For example, if you guys are not paying attention while I'm talking, if you're just looking away, you don't need to disturb me, but it's becoming more hard for me to speak. That's empirically proven, as if the spectator or the people who listen actually actively listening to you, because then you get some kind of energy. It feels better and easier to speak. We cannot measure that kind of energy or whatever it is, so we don't have a media for that information. But there must be some information because we have an effect. Kant had said something about it's called transcendental psychology, and he didn't mean psychology regarding the Freudian model or something. He was talking about the thought and where it ends in a logical way. And Kant said, logic is just a test of the reality to see how it is. So you test it, but you cannot extend the reality with logics. You cannot get over the reality. You cannot create something new because you have always to apply onto something which is already there, some idea, some concept, some physical things as a chain. If you use it in that context, if you use logic in a metaphysical thought, it might misguide. It might misguide because the conclusion will be wrong. As I say, Mr. Diaz is a fox. What we say in German for people who are kind of clever. And I say, every fox has a red tail. So logic tells me Mr. Diaz has a red tail. But I said Mr. Diaz is a fox in a symbolic way, in a metaphysical way, kind of. So if I start using logics there, it's still not working, because as we see, he doesn't have a red tail. Yes. And also, Kant said, such a community